Hello class, this is your instructor Reyes Espinosa. I'm glad to have you in this class. By this point, you should have read the section from L. Susan Stebbings' Thinking to Some Purpose that I assigned. You should have seen you should have seen John Simmons' video, Reason and Argument, part 1, lecture 1. After you see this video, Objective, Subject Relative, and Social Logics, you should see Simmons's Reason and Argument, part 1, lecture 2. And after that, there is one more PowerPoint that I did that you will see. There will be no audio to it. You're just going to have to go through it and read through it. So let's jump into this PowerPoint right here. Objective, subject relative, and social logics. All quotations on Protagoras and an analysis of his arguments are from the article Does Protagoras Refute Himself? From 1995 by T.D.J. Chappell. What I want to set up here is that the purpose of this video is to take some of that terminology that you have learned from Stebbing and Simmons and the ideas that they've presented and to problematize them in a very specific way. We're going to question here the role of logic in society and how it is that logic is objective or subjective or social. And I'm going to use Protagoras to help us along in understanding the aim and the purpose and the veracity, the truth conditions of logic and the propositional calculus. The propositional calculus is the system of sentences that we're working with in logic. So a preliminary note on a saying. First, I want to break this saying down because it has to do with society. This is the saying that you hear in shows and from my family and from friends, and we're just going to explore real quick just to get us thinking in the philosophical mode. Everything happens for a reason. Sometimes we're told or we say. So we're going to quickly explore what is right about this statement and what is wrong about this statement. Everything happens for a reason. Barring philosophers that do not believe everything happens for a reason, this statement is vacuously true. It's not specific enough, it's not descriptive enough, it doesn't provide much information. But it could be true. It could be. But let's problematize it. There's a philosopher by the name of Donald Davidson who did work on reasons and causes. And from his work, we can meaningfully say, everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for reasons and causes. We can meaningfully say that statement, and then we can ask, well, is it true that everything happens for reasons and causes? But already we have introduced causation into the picture. So now we have the competing claim, everything happens for a reason, against the claim, everything happens for reasons and causes. And just keeping those two in mind, we can put them together, or we can put them against each other and ask, well, we have to define, well, what is it to define reason, and what is it to define causation? And then we can say, and then after we set up that criteria, at least that criteria, we can ask, which one is true? Does everything happen for a reason, or does everything happen for reasons and causes? Some people believe that causes break down to reasons. This is to say that all causes are reasons. Or you could do the other argument. You could say that all reasons are causes. Or you could say that they're separate. In any case, we require philosophical argumentation to mitigate, to decide between those views. Furthermore, there's philosophers who deny that reason exists. So let's put aside reason. Let's say that reason doesn't exist. Then we're left with causation on the Davidson model. So everything happens because of cause and effect. But then there's philosophers that don't believe in the external world, and for them, causation it might not exist in that world. So then we're left with a statement: everything happens. Everything happens. So what have I done here? I have asked you to look at the statement, everything happens for a reason, and ask you to think critically about it. I have given you a competing claim to everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for reasons and causes. We kind of saw how those overlapped and intermixed. And then I asked you to believe or to think, well, what if reason doesn't exist? We're left with just causation. But for some philosophers, causation doesn't exist. So we're just left with a statement, everything happens, which we can still break down further and problematize further and think about more. But we don't have the time for that here. This is not a metaphysics class. So, next, we're going to cover Protagoras and his argument that all beliefs are true. Or at least Protagoras, at first we're going to see how it works. Protagoras' belief that all beliefs are true. And this will help us understand possible relativity of logic, or at least helps us figure out the limits of an objective logic. Protagoras believes that all beliefs are true. Since Protagoras' belief that all beliefs are true is itself a belief, it follows, somewhat trivially perhaps, from Protagoras' belief that all beliefs are true, that Protagoras' belief is true. Did your head just spin? Yeah, it's pretty gnarly. But essentially, this is telling us, if we put this in premise conclusion form, which we can do since you saw John's video, and you're going to keep learning more about this stuff in the next in the next John video and in my lecture, we're going to put this argument this way. Premise one is all beliefs are true. A premise, right, is just basically a sentence. So sentence number one is all beliefs are true. Premise two is all beliefs. Let me backtrack. Premise number one is all beliefs are true. Premise number two, premise one is a belief itself. This is to say that all beliefs are true is itself a belief. From this, we get our conclusion. Since all beliefs are true and that all beliefs are true is a belief, the belief all beliefs are true is true. I know it's super circular and it's hard to understand, but stick with me here. In order to defend this view that all beliefs are true, we would have to qualify. That is to say, we have to define what truth and falsity means. So Protagoras could do this three ways. Protagoras could say that all beliefs are true could be logically false, in which case actually he loses. His belief that all beliefs are true is false. End of story. We come up with some criteria, some objective criteria for saying Protagoras is wrong in this belief. Protagoras does not take that route. We could, but he didn't. 2. Protagoras could defend his view by saying that he accepts that it's a logical contradiction, but that this logical contradiction is consistent. Somehow it's coherent in his logical system. So he could say that it's true that some people believe his view is true, and it's also true that some people believe his view is false. But even though, and despite the fact that there is a logical contradiction, this is okay because it's somehow consistent. I'm being very vague here, but this is a position that other people have taken. However, Protagoras doesn't. But he could have taken that line of reasoning. What Protagoras does is that he says that he accepts that there is an interpersonal contradiction, some contradiction at the level of psychology or of personality, but that it's not a logical contradiction. Why? Because for Protagoras, truth is subjective. It's relative to the person. And we're going to see that in a second, how he says that. So we're going to ignore the first two views, and we're going to go with what Protagoras himself argued. This is how he defends his view, his belief that all beliefs are true, which is our premise one, remember? This is his argument. Suppose you say black is black, and I say black is white. Or you say up is down, and I say down is up. We seem to be contradicting each other. Yet according to Protagoras, we can both be right. For our beliefs are only relative truths. That is, subjective relative truths. Relative to what? Relative to us, to the individual. That, I take it, is the point of his famous slogan that man is the measure of all things. In particular, man, that is, any particular human, is a measure of truth about all things. You make your own truth. If anything is a truth, then it is a truth for someone. Conversely, if anything is a belief, then that belief is true. I'm sorry for not completing that sentence there. In writing, that is. So that's his argument right here. You can pause the video here, read it over again, but that is what he's saying. That is his argument. And this is what we can further say to critique that argument. Thus, the difficulty with a Protagorean relativism is not to rebut his argument. It is to see that what he says is an argument at all. For some people, they can't even accept that. Some people jump to trying to defeat the argument. But Chappell thinks that it's better to not see his argument as an argument. He says that, well, actually, I'm going to rephrase that. The argument only goes up to a point. There's a point that Protagoras thinks we get to that we can't argue anymore about his premise. This is the way Chappell puts it. He puts it between refutation and being defeated. He says, Bostock's conclusion is that, in a sense, one who propounds such a thesis as Protagoras does refute himself. Though I, Chappell, have argued that there is no sense in which such a person is strictly refuting himself by what he is saying. I think that there is a sense in which he is defeating himself by saying it. For as Bostock rightly goes on to say, if what Protagoras says is right, he has no claim on our attention. But as I have argued, as Chappell has argued, it is a point about self-defeat, not refutation. For Chappell, refutation is at the level of logic. There's a point where Protagoras stops being quote-unquote logical. And because for him, logic ends up being about an extreme, or about a kind of psychological, you can only be logical with yourself, essentially. And you are the measure of your own truth. So as long as you accept your own beliefs and your own truths, that's all you have to do to say that your belief is true. Because this truth condition is to say that truth is relative to the individual, that only the individual has truth. No matter if you're inconsistent with yourself, as long as you believe it, you're right. So logic is not a shared enterprise. It is a personal one. Refutation, on the other hand, is about a shared enterprise, about a shared logical enterprise between, well, in a community. There are standards of logic that if you violate those, you're not being logical. But for Protagoras, there comes a point that when you're trying to argue with somebody else, it's about a personal conflict, not a logical conflict. So, we can ask these questions from what we've learned so far. Is logic a shared enterprise? If so, how? Is it objective in the sense that it is mind independent? Is logic subjective? Is logic subject relative? That is, relative to a particular person. Is it strictly social? That is, in community. If it's social, is it both a mix of objectiveness and relativeness? If so, how? This is not a logic class. And this class, and so we're trying to learn this stuff to eventually get to some moral content. But we gotta know the rules of the game. And the truth is that the game is complicated. Logic and argumentation, we can argue about them, and we can try to talk about what is right or wrong in them. But for me, I don't think that Protagoras' views have been given their day in court. He's typically not covered, or if he is, it's a very brief 2-3 minutes that we give to him. And even if he's wrong, I think that this is one of the strongest positions to take in terms of relativism. Now, I end up falling on the camp that there is some objectivity to logic, and that there is a mix of objectiveness and relativeness. And the job for me is to say how that is. And the job for you is just to recognize that there's different camps, that there's people who believe that logic is strictly objective, and that even if humanity wasn't around, there would still be logic. Some people believe that it's subject relative. No matter how much you argue with somebody else, with another person, truth ends up being about the individual person. And on my camp, I think that it's about a community and a society, and that there is a mix of objectiveness and relative criteria. All right, thank you for listening to this. Make sure that you saw the previous make sure that you saw the previous video with John. That's lecture 1, and that before that you read the stebbing pages that I assigned. And after this, so feel free to review those. And after you have to also see lecture 2 from John Simmons on reason and argument, and make sure that you read my other PowerPoint, which will not have audio. It will just be the PowerPoint. After that, you're going to take 2 tests. One will be on logic, and the other one will be on philosophical argumentation. So make sure that you're taking notes throughout these videos, and well, make sure you take notes of the 3 videos, my PowerPoint, and of the stebbing pages. I'll try to provide a kind of cheat sheet to the quiz, well, to the tests. And again, the tests are combined 7% of your grade. All right. Shoot me any questions that you have over email, and future videos will probably include my face, but this one didn't.